Story 1. For context, I am a pastor in a large denomination that requires many years to become fully recognized or ordained as a clergy person. There are several interviews with different teams to determine if a person is fit to serve. When this story took place, I had already completed 4 steps and was working on the last and final step to be ordained. Part of this step required recording and submitting a sermon on one of a specific set of biblical texts. Sermons using outside text would not be accepted. At the time, I was an associate pastor in a relatively large church, with almost 1,000 attendees on a Sunday across multiple services. I was initially hired to be one of the primary preachers. However, the senior pastor would set the sermon series, sermon topics, and scriptures for each Sunday. We were asked to stay on theme and on topic for any service in which we preached. Soon after I arrived at this church, the senior pastor, who had been there for many years, announced his retirement. An interim pastor would take his place until the next long-term pastor was selected. We'll call this interim pastor, Pastor Richard. The first time I met with Pastor Richard after the former pastor's retirement, he told me that he didn't think I had what it took to be a pastor. He then proceeded to strip me of nearly all my pastoral responsibilities. Before his arrival, I regularly preached 3 or 4 Sundays a month, was called for visits, and oversaw the sacraments. After the meeting with Pastor Richard, I was relegated to organizing a team of 125 volunteers, ensuring we had liturgists, ushers, greeters, and parking lot attendants. My preaching opportunities were also cut to just once a month, at best, even though I was working on my paperwork for the final step toward ordination. Pastor Richard refused to schedule any of the biblical text required for the sermon for my ordination paperwork. To his credit, he did say that I could use any verses from the Bible that I wanted, as long as I stayed on theme for the sermon and series. However, I refused to manipulate Scripture to say something it doesn't. If a text is about forgiveness, I won't try to force it to fit a theme of justice. Somehow, every time I was scheduled to preach, the theme of the sermon did not align with any of the limited text I was allowed to preach for my paperwork. For anyone curious, it was also a requirement that the sermon be delivered in the church you were serving at the time, meaning I couldn't fill in for someone else to complete the task. Eventually, Pastor Richard's interim tenure was drawing to a close. There was one Sunday between his departure and the arrival of the next senior pastor. That Sunday was not part of a sermon series and did not have a selected theme. It was Preacher's Choice. This would have been perfect because I could get at least one sermon recorded for my paperwork submission. Usually, you'd want to record all of the texts so that you could choose the best one from the group. However, I was not scheduled as one of the preachers for any of the services. The 2 scheduled preachers for that Sunday were Greg and Sarah. Greg was not a pastor and was not on track to become a pastor. So, I went to Pastor Richard and asked if I could take Greg's place so that I could record at least one sermon for submission for ordination. Richard told me that I could not switch with Greg and that he would not allow me to take his place. I agreed that I would not take Greg's place and left his office. However, shortly after I left Richard's office, I went to meet with Sarah. I knew she wanted that particular weekend off, so I offered to switch preaching assignments. I would take the weekend I wanted, and she would switch for a weekend a month down the line. Sarah immediately agreed, and I went to the person who sent out our weekly email and had the information switched. I did not ask for permission, and I did not inform Richard of what I had done. The email went out on Wednesday night, and on Thursday morning, when Richard came in, the first thing he did was come into my office. He demanded to know why I disobeyed his order. I simply pointed out that he told me I couldn't preach in Greg's place, which I wasn't. Instead, I would preach in Sarah's place. There wasn't much he could do because the information had already been sent out to the church, so he left my office in frustration. I preached on Sunday, using one of the required texts, and submitted it for the final step in my ordination. Unfortunately, I was not ordained that year. It would take me another year beyond that. However, the look on his face when he realized I had followed his order to the letter, and there was nothing he could do about it, still makes me chuckle years later. Story 2. Now, before I get into this, I want to give some context. I'm a 31-year-old guy working full-time at my local mall. Usually, I just stick around the food court, cleaning tables and the like. But I also do other tasks, such as cleaning the lids of the mall trash cans, cleaning the vendor areas, and similar duties. One thing we have here at the mall are people who just walk around the mall to get some cardio in, or as we call them, mall walkers. Now, they usually buy some things or get some lunch in the food court. But other than that, they're harmless, just minding their own business and going about their day. Well, a couple of weeks ago on Saturday, which is our busiest day of the week, I was cleaning the carpets when I saw some mall walkers waiting at one of the entrances next to a clothing department store that I will leave unnamed as it would give away where I work. I tried telling them that they'd have to wait for security, but one of them pleaded with me to call security and let them in. We usually open the doors at 9 a.m. even though the mall opens at 10 a.m., so me being the people pleaser I am, which I am slowly but surely working on, I gave in and called security. My boss, while he wasn't furious about it, still wasn't pleased and told me I couldn't do that anymore, especially on Saturdays, as we'd only have one security guard on call. He said that the only thing I could do is ignore them, but if I wanted to tell them that they'd have to wait for security, then I shouldn't call them even if they begged me to. So, a couple of days ago, I was doing my rounds and saw those mall walkers waiting outside the entrance to the food court this time. I told them when the mall opens and that they'd have to wait. Some of them asked me to call security, but I told them I couldn't do that anymore. Some were upset, but they accepted it. Except for one lady, she practically banged on the door and demanded I call security and let them in at that very instant. One of the mall walkers told her to stop, but she was having none of it. I remember her saying word for word, "I didn't come all this darn way to the mall just to get turned away. I don't care what time you open. I want in, and I want in now." Again, I told her she had to wait until 10 a.m., and she started going off on me, telling me that I'm a terrible employee. I will admit, I rolled my eyes and just walked away. This made her furious, and she actually started punching the door and screaming at me to come back, which, nope. I did contact security to warn them about her, and they said they'd keep an eye out. Well, not even 5 minutes later, I heard a commotion in the vendor area for the food court, which was in between a sushi bar and a bakery. I contacted security again to tell them about it, and they said they were already en route. It turns out, this irate mall walker had snuck into the vendor area leading to both the food court and a jewelry kiosk, and one of the mall employees told her she couldn't be in there. This again made her furious, and she, from what the security guard told me, got in the employee's face, and it got physical. One thing to note is that the woman causing the disturbance was a white woman who had to have been in her 40s, and she was throwing down with a mixed-race woman who had to be in her late 20s to early 30s, specifying races for contextual reasons. The troublemaker was told she could either just leave the mall and accept a permanent ban, or she'd be arrested for breaking and entering as well as assault. I should note that I was a witness to this conversation between her and the guard. She then told the guard again, word for word, "Or as a third option, you can go take a hike and let me walk the mall, you ugly insert racial slur here." This prompted the guard to call 911, and the police arrived once the doors had opened. The woman was taken to jail for breaking and entering, assault, and resisting arrest. Seriously, what is with these entitled people and resisting arrest? It's a mystery that probably won't be solved. This may seem fake to some of you, and trust me, I wish it was. However, with how crazy this world is right now, who knows anymore, right? Story 3. About 4 years ago, I was hired as a contract to hire for a position at a major storage vendor. I put in my 2-week notice, but then got called by the account manager stating that Inc. pushed back my starting date a week. No biggie, I end up getting a week off work unpaid. So I close out my 2 weeks, and on Thursday, I'm supposed to start the following Monday. I get a call from the manager of the contract house, stating that there was some fraud involving my position and that it didn't exist. I'm like, WTF. They explained that the contract manager basically made up the positions in the hopes of getting paid. Additionally, he ran up over $10K on the company credit cards. I told them they'd be hearing from my attorney, as it was not my fault they didn't have proper checks on their staff, and my job was with them, not the end client. My attorney contacts the contract house's insurance company, and they won't start negotiating until my losses can be calculated landing a new job. So I started my job search in earnest. In addition to looking for a new gig, I began doing some work around the house, pulling up carpeting, painting, and installing a new laminate floor. Fortunately, and since I knew I'd land a job and I'd get paid for my time off, I was able to borrow some money from my parents to get the stuff done. I start Googling the guy, and of course I find him on an offender tracking system maintained by our state. I dig a little deeper and find he has an extensive criminal history dating back to the 80s. I start a new gig a month later, while my attorney starts negotiating with the contract house's insurance company. They lowball me, and I tell them to pound sand. When I forward the information about the contract house hiring a convicted felon, my pay for the job I left, the expenses I incurred, and some smooth words from my attorney about having a sympathetic jury because I left a job I had and was now out of work thanks to negligence on the part of the company they were insured by, they settled for the time I was out of work, which was a month, Cobra, the pay at my new contracted rate, and miscellaneous expenses related to job seeking. Part of the agreement was that I would not speak ill of the contract house, and I won't. I really don't have any issues with them, as they were honest about their screw-up and made good with me. I paid off my parents with the check. I contacted the contract house again and spoke to the manager. At this point, since things are settled, he apologizes and says that they've changed their procedures, including background checks as well as fraud checks on their corporate cards. He said the city wouldn't prosecute since the losses weren't large enough or verifiable. I point out that I was out of work for a month. He tells me I'm not the only one. There were 15 other people that were victims of this guy's fraud, and 11 of them put in their notice at their current jobs, including one guy that had moved from California back to the Midwest. The revenge. At this point, I'm mad at this guy. I personally am very good about finding work, but many of these people may not have been so fortunate. He screwed up so many lives with his fraud, and for the recruiting firm, they only lost money. I check this guy's LinkedIn profile a month or two later, and I find he has a new job as an account manager at another recruiting firm. I call the recruiting firm and tell them the story, as well as providing them links to his offender status. The manager tells me he just started 2 weeks prior, and he was in orientation. They fired him immediately. He lied on his resume. They didn't perform a background check. They wondered why his resume listed as a HR generalist at the state prison, not knowing he was in the state prison. I'm all for giving people another shot, but this guy has an extensive criminal record with multiple convictions for fraud, theft, B&E, including a B&E after the entire mess with the last recruiting firm, not to mention multiple stays in state prison. Story 4. Now, let me set the scene. I'm a guy who's got ink running through my veins almost as much as blood. You know the deal, right? Tats aren't just decorations. They're a part of me, each one with a story, a memory, a vibe. I've been all around this globe, and my tats reflect my adventures. I've got this dope Cleopatra piece I got done in Egypt, like the land of pyramids and all that jazz. It's not just about her iconic beauty. It's about the whole historic vibe. Whenever someone asks, I spin a yarn about how that ink was a nod to the pharaohs and the mystique of ancient Egypt. People eat it up, man. But wait, there's more. I've got another piece from Brazil that's got a whole different energy. It's this vibrant, colorful masterpiece that shouts out to the Amazon rainforest. That one's like a tribute to the amazing time I had down there, sipping on caipirinhas and dancing to samba beats. Trust me, that ink starts conversations on its own. Anyway, there I am, lying there, when this Karen and her mini-me daughter stroll in. Karen takes one look at me, and I could practically see the judgment raining down like a thunderstorm. She starts whispering some nonsense about me being a satanic cult leader or whatever. I'm just here like, lady, these tattoos are more about my love for adventure than anything else. So, this Karen is babbling on, and then her phone rings. Salvation, right? She marches away to answer it. And that's when her curious little spawn sidles up to me. She's like a mini artist in the making, and she's checking out my tats with eyes wide as saucers. "Hey there," I grin at her. "You like art?" She nods, her eyes still glued to the intricate designs on my arms. "You know, each of these tattoos tells a different story," I say, giving her a sneak peek into the world of tattoo tales. She's all ears, soaking up the stories like a sponge. She tells me she loves to draw and even dreams of being a tattoo artist someday. It's sweet this kid's got dreams bigger than her, and I'm all for it. Suddenly, Karen comes back, and her daughter quickly jumps back, like she's been caught red-handed. Karen gives her this icy glare and then proceeds to lose it on me. "Stay away from my innocent child, you Satan worshiper," she shrieks, her voice louder than a stadium concert. I'm all calm, trying to explain that we were just talking about art and dreams. But this Karen ain't having none of it. She's convinced I'm leading her kid down the path of the dark arts or something. Her daughter tries to reason with her. "Mom, he's nice. He just told me about his tattoos." Karen ain't hearing any of it. She's red in the face, and I'm pretty sure steam's about to come out of her ears. She goes full throttle with accusations, yelling at me like I'm the big bad wolf. Meanwhile, I'm here doing mental gymnastics, trying to figure out how a Cleopatra piece and a tropical Brazilian masterpiece make me a satanic cultist. I mean, seriously, lady? Karen ain't letting up, and that's when things escalate. She decides to take it up a notch and marches over to the pool security guard. She's yammering on about how I'm corrupting her child, and the security guy's got the "are you for real" look on his face. I can hear snippets of their conversation, and the security dude's like, "Ma'am, you're causing a scene. If you can't calm down, I'll have to ask you to leave." Karen ain't backing down. She's a force of nature on a mission. She's loud enough for the entire poolside to hear. People are probably just chillin' with their margaritas, giving the side eye to this drama unfolding. Honestly, I'd pay to see their faces. Karen continues with her theatrics, and the security dude's patience is wearing thin. He's like, "Ma'am, last warning, calm down or you'll have to leave." Does she calm down? Nope, she goes turbo mode. I'm just waiting for her to morph into the Incredible Hulk at this point. And then it happens. Security dude signals to his fellow guard, and they do the classic shoulder touch, the universal sign for "you gotta go." Karen's jaw drops like she's in a cartoon. She's probably not used to people actually standing up to her entitled antics. The guard gently guides her away from the pool area, and she's still sputtering with rage, waving her arms around like she's directing air traffic. The poolside returns to its peaceful ambience, and I'm left there, still trying to process the whirlwind that just happened. Her daughter comes over, looking all apologetic and embarrassed. "Sorry about my mom," she mumbles. I chuckle. "No worries. Hey, don't let anyone stop you from chasing your dreams, all right?" She gives me a shy smile and nods, like she's gotten a pep talk from a tattooed Yoda or something. And that, my friends, is how a pool day turned into an episode of Entitled Madness, all because of a few tattoos and one seriously triggered mom. Life's full of surprises, ain't it? So the next time someone tries to tell you that tattoos are gateways to the underworld, just remember this tale and have a good laugh. Peace out, Reddit. Story 5. Back when I was in high school about 3-4 years ago, I rode the school bus to and from home. I actually was on good terms with a driver, as for the first few years he drove the route. He brought his young kid and toddler with him every morning. While the two boys sat behind him, I would sit either in the seat across or behind and entertain the two. The boys loved me, and I always greeted the driver with a smile and greeting. Of course, the morning ride was nowhere near as crowded as the afternoon. It was so bad that students who rode had to have a bus pass sticker on their student's car for their bus. Reason being that riders would bring their friends on, or some kids would just hitch a ride. So, if you didn't have the pass, you couldn't ride. Even still, the bus was crowded as heck. to the point where there would be 3 to a seat. This will tie in soon. So, one day the new girl came on. When I first saw her hop on, I didn't think anything of it. That day, I was carrying my backpack, my gym bag, which was carrying my normal clothes, since gym had been my last period, and my clarinet case. It took up a fair amount of space, but I didn't really have a choice. Sitting beside me at that moment was my sister's friend, who I had let sit beside me because the bus was starting to get crowded. We were making small talk when the new girl came up. Note: the new girl had claimed to be an anti-bullier, someone who will stand up for someone else, as she put it. Now, I don't remember the exact conversation, but this is the gist of it. "What are you doing?" she asked. Look at all the stuff you have." She points to my 3 things. "How can you take up this much space?" She then points at my sister's friend and says, "She barely has any room." My sister's friend actually had plenty of space. She was a small girl, and I tried to explain that, but it fell on deaf ears. "You move out. I'll fix this," she told my sister's friend. "Wait a minute," I tried to talk, but she cut me off and pushed my sister's friend over to another empty spot, then sat her heavy self beside me and shoved me in. I'm not being rude. She was on the heavier side. "Hey, stop squishing me," I told her. She of course ignored me, and then went on a rant about how I was bullying my sister's friend and how I was so self-centered. This continued on for the first half of the ride. I tried to ignore her at first, but she would yank out my headphones, shove me, yell at me, the works. This, all from the girl who claims to hate bullies. My temper was beginning to rise, and it finally hit a breaking point when she said, "And this is why you don't have any friends." That's when I finally snapped. Let me give some backstory. You see, I was a bit of a loner, but not really by choice. I'd always been the weird kid, so the other teens generally ignored me. Though, I had a lot of boys pick on bully me. Pre-middle school, I would throw a fit, run off, and/or tell a teacher, but little would come out of it. In grade 7, I finally had enough, and when some kid picked on me, I just dropped a textbook on his head. Gave him a nice goose egg. Anyways, the point is that after that, if someone picked on me and ticked me off enough, I would swing. And being a tough-built girl who played baseball in the summer, I had a good right hook. Most of the boys backed off after grade 8, and I cooled off a bit, but there would still be some dummies, so I would still swing. Problem: I had never hit another girl. Never. Only because I never really got into the same fights I would with the boys, so I had more respect for that gender. So, back to the story. The new girl had pushed me past my limits, and I finally lost it. With all the strength I could muster, I slammed the heel of my palm into her jaw, smearing her makeup and shoving her out of the seat and onto the aisle floor. I started screaming at her, crying, "You're nothing but another bully." That rattled her because she got really mad after this, though I think she was still in a bit of shock. Thankfully, the cool driver I talked about at first stepped in. He stopped the bus and turned off the intercom. "Could you please leave her alone? Go sit somewhere else, now, or I will leave you right here," he told the new girl. She listened and slunk off. But I was in tears, crying into my hands. I couldn't understand what I had done to deserve that. I had never interacted with her till then, and I hadn't gotten into any fights since she first came to the school. Some of the kids around me asked if I was okay, but I was too hurt and ignored them. When my stop along with my sister's friend and a few other kids came up, I was already flying off it, across the street and into my house. When my mom came home from work, she found me curled up on the couch, crying my eyes out. When she calmed me down, I told her what happened, even showed her the makeup smear that was still on my hand. Mom told me to go clean it off, and then headed down to her computer. When I joined her, she had her email pulled up and was already typing in the CERT's name. A CERT, or Special Education Resource Teacher, is a teacher who works with special needs students, ranging from mentally disabled to troubled teens. My school's CERT was Mr. B, everyone called him that, and he was really cool. I got along great with him, and he was on my side for all the fights I ended up getting into. When I asked my mom what she was doing, I was a little surprised. She wanted to email Mr. B about what happened. And to be honest, it made sense. Yes, I hit the new girl, but she had instigated it. Normally, when one student hits another, they are the ones who get in trouble. But in this case, we could make it work in my favor. So, we sent off the email, detailing what had happened and how the new girl had started it. When I came to school the next morning, I was called into the principal's office. The new girl was there, and she was fake crying. "She hit me," she says. The principal looked ready to punish me. When Mr. B walked in, he sat beside me and gave me a small smile. The principal went on a rant about how my behavior was unacceptable and how I needed to apologize. Like I was going to apologize to that which... At the end of the rant, the new girl looked smug. But then Mr. B stepped in. "That may be, but I want you to look at this." He then set a printed copy of the email Mom had made, with the timestamp and everything. You see, she was just defending herself from the new girl. We also have witnesses with her sister's friend and the driver, as well as a few other students. By that point, the new girl looked shocked. I guess she couldn't believe that I had told someone first about what happened. Needless to say, the new girl ended up in some deep doo-doo with the principal for lying and bullying another student. We never really interacted after that, outside of a few incidents, and when I graduated with honors, I never saw her again. Story 6. I've wanted to share this for a while, as the stories I have shared about my mother with my friends have left them flabbergasted, while I laugh at it despite the emotional pain. Please understand that I have tried not to make this post too revealing when it comes to personal information, and that I hold no ill towards my father, as he had always been too busy with work to be aware of what occurred through the last 30 years of my life. I have written this in a dot point rather than a story, as I thought it would be easier to share. It is also a bit over the place, as I was writing as I remembered things and had to write through the tears, as this did reawaken some trauma. I have no doubt missed some stuff, but this is the gist of it. From age 8, she always made me assist in cleaning the entire house, but she never made my brothers do it according to her. I can't clean correctly as an adult. Upon being advised by my primary school teachers that I have a learning disability and other possible issues, she was instructed to get me tested. Never did. I have since been diagnosed with dyslexia, dyscalculia, ADHD, and autism. Before and after this advice, my mother would physically beat me for doing poorly in school, saying, "Why can't you be smart like your brothers?" I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety at 14, 18, and 25. All 3 times, my mother disagreed with this. She always told me it was expected to have heavy periods, which wasn't. It was endometriosis, which she had and had a hysterectomy for. She just chose not to tell me. She bought my brothers new cars for over $25,000 each. I got a second-hand one that cost $9,000, as she knew I would damage it, calling me a reckless driver. She has never seen me drive. She refused to teach me to drive, and then complained that I was 25 years old and didn't know how to drive. They refused to pay for someone to teach me, and I couldn't get a job because I couldn't drive. Constantly insulted my weight, even as a prepubescent child. Her reason? I'm encouraging her to lose weight, even after being told what she was doing would affect me negatively. She has always stated that my clothes look too tight on me. They fit me. It's just that I have big breasts, and therefore my shirts are stretched around my breasts, giving the illusion of being too small. My mother is somewhat obese and always says she can fit into my clothes. I think this is another way for her to insult my weight. If anyone is curious, I'm of average size in my country. Whenever guests were over, she told me to stay in my room and be quiet so as not to embarrass her. She blamed me when I was getting bullied at school and said it was my fault for not being normal. This involved primary and secondary school. She never punished my brothers for picking on me, even physically. Said it was my fault for upsetting them, when all I had to do was walk past them, and they would attack me. One even punched me in the head, causing my head to slam into the kitchen countertop. This happened in front of her, and she yelled at me. I was 18. On my birthdays, she always talked about how great my brothers were to my friends and my friends' parents, while also talking badly about me, pointing out how better my brothers were. I was never allowed a birthday at a venue or anything costly. I always got $5 cakes. My brother's parties were always at a venue with custom $40 cakes. She completely controlled my hair and wardrobe until I was 13. My entire wardrobe consisted of pink dresses and skirts. I'm not too fond of dresses and skirts, and I hate pink. I wasn't allowed video games, toy cars, or anything she considered boys' toys. I always got Barbies and teddies, and she always complained when I wouldn't play with them, despite me telling her I was not too fond of girly stuff. My room was pink bed, bedding, dresser, curtains, chairs, carpet, lights, etc. When I was 6, I stole a black permanent marker and attempted to color it in. She caught me and yelled at me. Once again, I kept stating that I hated pink. When I got into sewing as a teenager, mainly for cosplay, she took it as a sign I was embracing being a girl and went out and bought pink dresses. She threw a tantrum when I refused to wear any of it, as she assumed I would because I was into sewing. She is friendly to all of my friends when they're over, but the moment they leave, she insults them, making remarks about their looks and interests. I got on antidepressants at 25. She keeps telling me to go off them. Her father has had depression for over 60 years and has been on antidepressants for that time. He has told me never to stop. She once shouted at me in front of my best friend, calling me names and insulting my intelligence. It left my best friend traumatized, and they were also shocked by how calm I was. I've grown used to her abuse. After getting abdominal surgery, which is a 6-week recovery, she kept yelling at me to do chores, such as bending over and picking up stuff. My recovery had to be prolonged by 5 weeks, thanks to her. My sister-in-law, who had been 5 postpartum with a C-section, yelled at her when she ordered me to pick up something off the floor 3 weeks into my recovery. She had a vegetable garden and chicken coop to access fresh eggs, fruit and vegetables, but she has yet to go out there. She ordered me to attend to the garden and chickens, which included planting, weeding, feeding, watering, collecting eggs, and cleaning the coop. I took a chance and confessed to my mother about my diagnosis, and she refused to believe it, as she gave me the perfect childhood. I have depression, anxiety, PTSD, childhood trauma, traumatic OCD, and emotional deprivation disorder. Yes, this was all caused by her, according to my therapist. I still live at home due to dealing with unemployment, and my last brother moved out 4 years ago. None of my brothers ever paid rent or board, nor did they ever assist with chores. Yet my mother expects me to help with chores, and if I'm busy or can't, she will call me a freeloader, even if I've offered to help with rent, which she refused to take money from me. My parents also travel twice a month for work and have done this for years, so they also need me here to take care of the house and pets. When I was 14, my mother started going on work trips with my father. I was told to cook, clean and do laundry for my older brothers, as they're too tired after work and school. I once asked her if it was because I was female, and she screamed at me for accusing her of being sexist. I was never allowed to walk around in a singlet top with a bra on underneath, as it was too revealing and salacious, yet my brothers were fine to walk around in only their underwear. Yes, I was wearing pants shorts during these times. I was sawed at 8 by 3 men. She refused to believe this. It happened again when I was 18 by a good family friend. She responded, "Impossible, he would never do that," and I have been forced to sit through many gatherings with that man since.